right. Well, we can get started. And if people jump in, great. We're recording it, so we can always share it with people later on if they're interested. We do have this set up so that it's a more regular Zoom meeting as opposed to the webinar style, so that we have some engagement happening. I think everyone knows who I am, and Erin, actually, that's on the call right now. So,
hi, Jenna.
So we'll just kind of get going. Erin, you want to take it away? What we're going to tackle?
Yeah. So today's all about learning what is CRO. We'll get into a little bit of A/B testing, as well as conversions and how to kind of take some psychology lessons with that, and also your emotions and how that works with conversions. And then we'll get into a little bit about how to create your own CRO process. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end, but obviously feel free to chat us questions throughout. Or, if we're at a pause, you can unmute yourself and just ask that way.
But before we get started, we're going to do what we refer to as a gut test. So what I'd like you to do is take out a sheet of paper and a pen, or you can just do it on your computer. But really what we're going to do is we're going to present a series of images, 10 different slides, and there's going to be 2 options on every single image, and just trusting your gut, which one connects and resonates with you best. So on this piece of paper, make a list of 1 to 10. I'm going to show you each slide for 7 seconds. And again, gut reaction. So any specific questions before we begin this fun exercise? Throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. No? All right, let's do it. First one. All right, that is it. And if you could throw in the chat or unmute yourself and share what were the results of the first one, and for was it A or B, for the first one, and the second one, third one, and just kind of let us know. So the second one, what was your result? Throw it in the chat. You can just do all of them at once if you want. Since there's not a lot of other people on the call, we'll just circle back. We don't have to do that part of it. But what we're going to get into the reason behind this approach in just a bit, as Erin goes ahead. Thank you. Awesome. And shares what is CRO. Right. Take it away.
That's why we're all here today, is to talk about CRO. So CRO, or conversion rate optimization, is the process of optimizing your site or landing page based on user behavior to improve the likelihood of them taking action or conversions. So however you define your conversions, and it's important because there's a lot of different ways, whether it's emailing you, filling out a contact form, clicking through on a call to action, those are all conversions if you consider them to be so. But the point that we're going to get into a little bit is oftentimes optimizing your site is driven by data and specifically, tracking how users interact, but it's also by your gut. So the reason why we just did that gut test and also the example we've pulled up here, there are some things that intuitively we all know to be kind of a poor design versus a great design in terms of a website.
The other thing though with the gut test, I think we had a couple other people on to have participated in it. We'll see that the gut reaction of one person is not always the same gut reaction of another. So part of the beauty and the fun and the joy of CRO, it is not a black and white science. There is an art to it, and it's really about understanding your ideal customer and what's going to connect and resonate with them. And that's where we want to look at the purpose. Specifically, we are looking at your website. I mean, everything you're doing from a marketing standpoint, we are expecting some sort of action to take place, and that's that conversion. The conversion not necessarily being dollar signs, but the conversion of, here's an email I'm sending out and I want them to open it. That is a conversion. They're taking a step. So think about conversions as taking that next step. The goal being dollar signs at the end of the day, or whatever that primary objective is. So one of the things that you really have to think about is who is your audience and what is important to them? What is it that you want them to be doing? So your website should really be clear and have some purpose behind who it is that is engaging with it. So clear and obvious what it is that you do, that solution that you are able to provide for them. Some level of trust is a critical component to improving and increasing that conversion. And then what is it that you want them to do? That we have to make it clear. And I see this error on so many websites is we're not making it easy for that person to actually take that next step, which ultimately hinders the level of conversions that take place. Your website at the end of the day is your most important marketing asset, in my opinion, because one, you own this. We don't own social media. We don't own the internet in general, but we own our website and we can control what happens on it. Two, it's your 24/7, 365 salesperson. No other entity, tool, resource, human being on this planet is going to be working for you as hard as your website is working nonstop. So let's talk about the audience a little bit deeper. And one of the components that I really want to make sure is important is from a content standpoint and understanding that individual that is engaging and digesting your information. So just who is it that is ultimately reading your content? Who is digesting this information? How do they like to consume information? Do your readers like visual content? Do they want infographics, photos? Do they prefer to read long form of text? Do they want to download white papers or ebooks to their Kindle so that they can read them on a plane or read really heavy research articles? Really understanding that person and the type of content they want is going to be critical for you to be able to provide the type of content that they're going to be able to engage with. Understanding the specific channels or devices. So are they typically on their phone, an iPad, tablet, or are they, do they actually want to touch and feel the materials? So, sometimes when I download a white paper, I like to print it out so that I can actually write or highlight things. So making it easy to print, don't have a solid big heavy color that's going to eat up all of my ink, but rather keep it simple. So these are some things you really have to take into consideration to make it easy for that ideal customer to consume that content. The other thing that's really important to be aware of is what are the topics that are trending. And there's a lot of tools and resources to be aware of that, but what are the questions that people are asking that's going to ultimately engage and provide value? And as I mentioned, what is going to make them convert? Is it the message related to buy now, subscribe? Are there any sort of automation tools that you can offer? What is that trigger that's ultimately going to make them take the next step? And figuring out that is vital to have that message be so powerful. It makes them want to take that next step as opposed to having any sort of reservations to doing that conversion. At the end of the day, your content strategy is a critical component, and you really need to make sure that one, you're answering all these questions related to your customer, your ideal client, whatever, however you want to position that, so that you're moving them through that sales funnel. The next component, with regards to content and messaging overall, is A/B testing. Erin, why don't you dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. So some of those questions, like Lori mentioned, are great to kind of work through ahead of time as you're writing your content, or even before you start writing your content. But A/B testing is really kind of putting that content to the test, as well as other elements on your website, as far as whether or not your audience responds to them and which ones are maximizing those conversions. So with A/B testing, I think one of the most important things to take away is it's important to only test one variable at a time. So really, when you do an A/B test, and it can be through kind of different automation services, things like that, you're giving different users different experiences, whether you are using one hero image in option A and a different hero image in option B. And you're seeing if it really makes a difference in terms of whether or not they click through to the next page, for example. But the important thing with those types of tests is you really only want to change one variable at a time. You don't want to give different users two very different websites overall, because then you're not exactly sure which variables made that difference in terms of conversions. So anything can be changed in an A/B test. You've got images, you've got colors, fonts, different visual effects, even how you structure your content, as you see in the image we've got on the slide. I think the other thing to remember is that there's no such thing as the best button color or the best font. With design, and color, contrast is really what's going to matter. It's not that suddenly green is your magic color that's going to make them click on the button, but the fact that the green is against a stark white makes it really easy to see. And I think visual clarity, whether that be through colors or fonts, images, etc., that's going to be your key to conversions, right? Clarity is going to trump persuasion and persuasive writing at the end of the day, as long as it's clear and easy to read and it's clear that you tell them what to do next. That's going to help you overall in terms of your CRO.
Yeah, I see a lot of people that want to, and a lot of websites have everything, which is, we want to tell the whole story, but we really need to focus on answering the one specific challenge or problem that's out there, instead of saying, here's 50 different solutions. It's, here's your problem, here's the solution, and this is how you move forward. So keep it simple. I mean, this has been the KISS philosophy has been like the marketing, golden rule. Keep it short and simple. But you also do want to focus on answering any sort of reservations that someone may have, which is going to help you to improve your conversions. And it's all testing. There is, as Erin said, there's not like, oh, red buttons convert better than orange. No, that's not true. It depends on a number of variables that has a factor on that conversion. It's the message, it's the visuals, it's the clarity, and the color, as long as it's contrasting and easy and jumps out, is really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yep.
Speaking of color.
Yeah. So this test or this game is going to give you an example as far as how psychology and the way that we think with color, but also just heuristically, can kind of affect how you process information. So it's a fun little game, and it's a little bit of a psychology lesson, but we think it's really interesting as far as CRO. So the point of this test, we're going to give you an image in a second. There's different words and they're all colors, but then there's also different colors that each word is in. So And really, as far as a psychology standpoint, you've got a couple of different ways to process information. One of those ways is heuristically, kind of based on your intuition, your emotions, your habits. Another system is kind of a more logical, rational, very systematic approach to processing information. And part of this test, the point is to see the difference between those two systems. So we're going to go ahead and show it. And what I want you to do, just yourself, start saying the colors that you see in each row. So for the first row, you'd say red, blue, green. I'll give you a minute to do that. Depending on your experience as you're going through it, you may think, oh, that was really easy. You can give us a big thumbs up in the chat, or you can give us a thumbs down if you thought that was really difficult. But kind of the point is, with this test in particular, you'll find that that logical, systematic way of thinking, which is, you know, just naming the colors that you see, oftentimes conflicts conflicts with that first system of relying on the heuristics or your instinct to say the word that you see, right? So it's just interesting from a processing standpoint. You really want to make sure that you are you're not only appealing to that logical way. You don't want to give content or present content in a way that's going to give that same kind of like conflict in terms of processing. You want to make it logical and systematic, but you also want to use some of those heuristics and persuasive tools to help with that processing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, wow. Ooh, that's deep. It's really good information, though. It's fascinating. And this is the things that obviously get our mojo going on a lot of levels. Because everything, you know, psychology is, our brain is what's really making us make decisions at the end of the day. So it's fascinating to look at kind of what is fueling some of these decisions. The other side of this is that emotional side of things a little bit. So very high level. I mean, you look at different color palettes and you know, sometimes I see brands just picking a color because it's a color they like. That's not necessarily the right way to tackle things, though. I mean, you really have to think about how you want people to feel and what is that perception that you want to be persuading others to have about you. And oftentimes a certain color on a page as a button, you know, or within your brand can really influence whether or not someone wants to proceed and take that next step to ultimately engage with you. So the simple example I always like to share, you know, if you're in the financial industry, the color that you absolutely do not want to use is red, because anyone that knows numbers, red is a negative number in general, and you don't want to be associating yourself with a red color if you're a financial space. However, if you look at some of the meanings that come and are connected with red, you know, bold, exciting, active, power, those are really strong words, but just depending on the industry and the mindset that people have and how colors play into that, it's extremely fascinating and very powerful. So, you know, we've got green very heavily in our brand, and that's because we have, you know, growth, clarity, prosperity. I mean, these are all words that really resonate with who we are. And that's why we decided and intended on proceeding with this color palette. And going a little bit deeper with regards to emotions and just those conversions, which is ultimately what we're talking about. This is something that's really important. So it's not just the colors, obviously, it's the words. And we've touched on that a little bit, but at the very beginning of any sort of relationship, when it comes to emails or social media, the text in your ad, the title of your blog post, the title of your podcast, your webinar, anything, whatever that message is, that's going to be the first trigger that ultimately decides whether or not someone takes that next step. They click on the link, they download the document, whatever it is. So that phrase, that message is so powerful, so important that you have to really invest time in making sure it's obvious and clear what that message is that's going to be conveyed on the next page. When it comes to an email, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I post this on my LinkedIn all the time, do not title your newsletter month newsletter. I'm not going to open it at the end of the day. And likely your open rates are going to be fairly low unless you have that established trust with that audience. Then the only reason they're opening it is because of the from. They're not opening it from the subject line. But most people will open from the from if there's an established trust level that's created. What we're looking at is increasing those conversions and increasing the open rates of your emails, your blog posts, all of these other things. And that's based on the title. And people make those decisions either on an emotional or an intellectual level. So you have to understand, and often it can be crossed to emotional and intellectual. Are you connecting with them, pulling at their heartstrings, or really getting deep into something that's going to make them go, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I feel right now. This is a problem that I have right now. I'm going to open this. I'm going to click on this ad, whatever it is. On the intellectual level, oftentimes in the B2B space, we're really focused on education, and people want to learn how to be better at what they're doing in their business. They're, right now, globally, there's challenges with recruiting. So if this is an issue that you're facing, that intellectual statement could be like how to attract the right talent in 24 hours, something that's going to just wow them, pull them in immediately. But it's connecting with them, it's educating them on that intellectual and or emotional level. So I'm actually, give me a second. I have a blog post that I wrote on LinkedIn that kind of goes a little bit deeper on this. I'm going to throw it in the chat here. And I have a couple links to tools that actually are really cool and let you test and measure the emotional and intellectual strength of your headline, your title, your subject, whatever it is. So definitely take a look at that when you get a chance. The other component that's going to help you with these conversions is not just the message, which is obviously something that's going to draw us in oftentimes, but it's that visual asset. Whether it's, an image that's highlighting or promoting the blog, or the visual that's on your social media post, whatever that is, that visual, that eye candy is what I like to refer to it as, video, static image, whatever it is. It has to connect and resonate and speak to that individual, again, on that emotional or intellectual level. But the biggest mistake that I see where I think there's a huge drop off in those conversions is when someone says, yes, this connects with me, I'm going to click and learn more or whatever it is. And then that visual representation is gone. So you have to make sure you carry over whatever that message is with that visual component from that initial, this is what I want you to do, to, okay, you did it. Here's the page that I want you to continue on that journey of the next steps that you want them to take. You have to have a very nice, consistent visual and message that carries through from start to finish there. Whew, that was meaty. All right, Erin. Let's dive into actually creating this process. And Erin's got a really cool graphic to help illustrate this a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've gotten at a lot of different aspects or ways that you can really improve your site to maximize those conversions, right? And that's the goal of CRO. But really, it's taking a look at a lot of those different elements, finding those insights, and discovering what matters, particularly to your audience, right? So there's a number of ways you can do this, and there's a number of things to kind of track over time. One of those being kind of just a basic technical analysis. Going back to what Lori mentioned, if your users on a desktop or on a mobile all the time, right? That can be really important in terms of looking at how your site performs on those different devices, but also looking at site speed, for example. Analytics, more, it's just important that you set those analytics up correctly so that you can track a lot of things as far as behavior flow, or, you know, most visited pages, time spent on your website, etc. Qualitative surveys are an interesting one. There's a couple of different things recommended as far as whether you could put a poll up and pull new users to your site. There's also the idea of surveying your current customers or people who have already interacted on your site and just ask for some feedback. Behavior tracking is like that, but it's a little bit more data focused in that you're just seeing in real time kind of heat maps where people's cursor lives the most or where people click to, etc. That can be really powerful in terms of understanding how users actually use your site. User testing, same kind of thing, but it's really cool watching users in real time use your site and see if they follow down the funnel that you're trying to set up. And finally, copy testing and further on, you know, kind of that heuristic analysis gets back to the idea that content really feeds into that CRO. And so it's important to make sure that your content is resonating and making sense to your audience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many different ways to kind of dive into this. And I think, you know, everything that we preach in and out is what is the goal that we're trying to achieve at the end of the day? And then you kind of reverse engineer that and evaluate all the steps in the process from start to finish and figure out, you know, what levers can we tweak? And you don't want to do it all at once. As we started, as Erin really emphasized with the A/B testing, is you start with one lever and you evaluate and say, did this increase or decrease, or was it, you know, remain status quo? And once you've kind of figured out and played with that one lever, then you move on to another lever. And then you just kind of, it takes time. But if you invest the time and energy into this process and you do it the right way, you're going to win. I mean, at the end of the day, you're tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until you find that perfect balance that says, all right, our conversions are capped out at this part, you know, and then you go back to levers and say, okay, can we do anything different now? Do we have to add a new lever into the process? So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but it's being systematic about it. That's really important.
For sure.
All right, so that's what we've got from a valuable educational standpoint. Hopefully you found some value in it. We're going to open it up for questions, but first I just wanted to share that we do offer a website strategy session where we'll dive into the navigational structure and just audit it from a high level CRO standpoint for an investment of $99. You can do that at keystoneclick.com/website strategy and get some time with me on the calendar. In summary, we talked about what is CRO, A/B testing, conversion from a psychology and an emotional standpoint, creating your CRO process. And then we're going to open up for questions. Just real quick, though, next week, we've got a panel discussion, expert panel discussion on the topic of websites. I've gathered some of my favorite website designers across the country, and we're going to be diving deep into some best practices that we're just going to share with you. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now, if I can find that button. All right, and we'll open up for questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself, you know, whatever is easiest for you, and we'll go from there. Or feel free to share your biggest takeaway as well. Nothing? That's good. That's fine.
As I think Lori mentioned at the start, but we are recording this session and we will make this available to you so you can go back and rewatch, and also feel free to reach out to us at any time, you know, if you have questions, want to follow up further, etc., on anything that you learned.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Feel free to reach out, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll see ya.
Thanks,
Bye,
Lauren.
everyone.
Sharon.
All right. Bye.